Good morning.
We,
Good morning.
uh,
I am just coming straight from teaching a fencing lesson, which went really great. It was really fun. So, this previous weekend for me, TQ was here visiting, and we did a whole bunch of fencing. And they had just been coming off of being at RASP, right? And so they had all kinds of new drilling paradigms they wanted to work. And then I completely wanted to learn what they had just learned. And so they were playing being the coach for me, and I was being the student and learning all sorts of stuff. And so then I got to take those lessons and reinterpret them into longsword for my student today, who
hmm,
found it amazing and fun. And so I'm very high energy from that.
hmm.
How was your week?
uh, my week was pretty standard fare. So as a traditional Irish musician who uh, derives a substantial part of their livelihood from playing Irish music, it's that time of year. So,
Of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
Of
So
course it is. I had not even thought about that.
yeah, it's a real thing. It's a huge deal, and it's a big meme and inside joke between me and all my other musician friends, because it's you know, often I'll make as much, I'll do as I'll make as much money just within the next 3 or 4 weeks as I will like the rest of the year sometimes,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
just because. So I mean, it's good, but it's also this like absurdly exhausting, um, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But it's good. So go
Are
ahead.
you able to find places for growth and exploration during this time, or do you find that
Hmm.
the pace of it keeps you to your comfort zone?
Yeah, it's pretty prohibitive. There's not a lot of room for, um that it is interesting that you bring that up. So I was just talking with my kids. I don't remember who I was talking with the other day, but we were talking about like, if you if I asked you today,
Yeah.
what are you what are you working on? What's the focus of your attention in terms of growth, right? What's the focus in terms of self improvement, or just like a thing that you find important, that you're devoting some attention to, right?
Yeah.
You'd probably have an answer. You'd probably have like three, right? I think like normal people who are like who there are people who have like 25 things that they're in the middle
Right.
of, and there's varying degrees of success within that, right? So like people there are people there believe it or not, there are people who can um you know uh load that much onto their plate and still do a fairly good job eating all of it.
Yeah.
But then like I think normal people probably can manage 2 to 3, I think, just in terms of what's like the major focus of our attention. But
Yeah.
I wonder how often is it that well, so like I said, I believe you could probably give me 2 to 3, right? I can certainly give you 2 to 3 at any given time, or at least reflecting on it, that was sort of what I came to.
Yeah.
um you know but but it's
So,
funny that you bring that up, right? Because like this is just a few days ago that I'm saying this, right? But
right.
ask me in 3 weeks, and I won't even wait. That right? That's a thing. I
Yeah.
can't. I don't even know what you're. I just want to
Right.
get through this week, right? So that is true, right?
It gets like that. Yeah, that makes sense. It's fascinating that you say 2 to 3 because in the I'm a huge proponent of having a training notebook, right? Um, I suck at journaling properly,
Mm,
but I'm pretty good at my training notebook. And in the front of my training notebook, I always have three large goals
mm,
that I'm working on. And if I get one, and then add one. Yeah. And so like they live there just crossed off. Oh, and I'll put a date like achieved, right? And whatever. So yeah. 3, because that's our culture. But yeah, that's super cool. So you're just gonna be swimming. You're like a shark. Move or die. Keep going.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Move or die. That's what it's going to be like for me for the next couple of weeks. But I have a lot of questions for you because well, no, because you've had an exciting week, right? So my week has been kind of mundane and really just gearing up, revving up for what I have in store over the course of the next month. But you have spent a significant amount of time over the course of the last 2 weeks, right? So, well, today and then like last week, dealing with fencing and dealing with new, fun, interesting ideas about fencing. So I would start by saying, tell me about your lesson today, right? While it's fresh in your mind, because nominally or notionally, this is a fencing podcast.
I mean, kind of. Okay. So what we were working on was, how would I phrase this? Well, I'll tell you what the drill was, which is deceptively simple. Using my floor, which has a lot of markings on it, so you can always be where you are, right? So you're not going to fuck your measure up and all that. My training partner was taking 2 steps forward, setting their left foot. They're in whatever guard they were in. We played with a couple different guards. Well, fuck it. They're on shouldered Fontaine. Yeah. I don't move. I don't respond. I don't do anything. They sheason and hit my face. They better be going, right? That's option 1. Option 2, they take their 2 steps. They're in their guard. They hit that point. I step back. They should not respond whatsoever. They should just be able to have not moved because I left, right? And then that was step 1. And so I would either present, nothing happens, your left foot is set, you got to go, or your left foot is set, I moved, don't go. Let that energy go, right? So really it's a lesson on observation and on having that tension within you to be able to go, but that has not overtaken you so that you don't have to go.
That's really interesting. I like that. I'm gonna stop you for a second and break that down a little bit, right? So so to my mind, right, the first thing that you've done is you've trained a basic skill, right? The basic skill is Shisen. I'm gonna adjust my camera because I feel like for some reason
you do keep freezing.
Yeah, I keep freezing, and I don't know why I keep freezing, but I'm going to do a thing and see if it helps at all.
Your audio is beautiful, so.
Well, thank you.
We have that.
What? No, that's not helpful. I'm a little. I'm a
Maybe
little
it's
worried.
your internet.
It could be my internet. One thing I might attempt here is to let me adjust my camera on this end. Sorry.
That's
folks.
okay.
We'll see if that helps. So anyway, so you've trained the basic skill. You've trained this basic skill, right? You've trained the components of the basic skill. I'm frozen again. Yep. All right. It's so right. You not and then you put it in a broader context, right? The broader context is you step into measure that is appropriate to Shisen, and then you've broadened the context on the other end by giving your opponent an opportunity to either move back or not, and that gives you 2 different branches, right? What you can travel, and then you're working the timing, right? So now you're working the internal. Initially, you're working the internal timing of the action, just like getting the shisen done proportionately correctly. But then you've introduced the external timing, right? So the opponent stepping back at first, you probably do it atemporally, right? So you do it in such a way that like your opponent can step back, and then you think, wait, am I supposed to? Okay, I'm supposed to go. So then, or I'm not supposed to go, or whatever, right? Like
Right.
you're doing that, but then eventually it's like you step in and then you go, and so you're working that timing. I'm gonna just do this. This is gonna be my camera quality is gonna go to crap, but that might help the freezing thing. So anyway, okay, so so yeah, so you're working that timing.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, you've introduced something that I really enjoy thinking about, which is like how to comport your body, right? So that you're able to execute that timing, right?
Yeah.
Because that requires what you described as attention, right? So it requires knowing that as I step into measure, right, I need to chamber my weight in such a way that I can push off with the correct foot, right? That the other foot, right, the
Right.
foot that I'm stepping with is light, right? So
Right.
so you have to so you're almost you almost have to have all of your weight on one foot in order to do this at its optimal efficiency, right?
Yeah.
Not all of your weight, right? Like obviously you have a base, right? Because otherwise you'll fall over. Go ahead.
Well, at one point, all of your weight will be, or you cannot possibly pass.
Right, exactly. So,
Yeah.
but in the moment of decision making, right, you can't have that, right? So you have to have
Correct.
as close to that. You have to have as close to that as you can, like reasonably achieve, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's some like maximal percentage of like what your weight should be at in order for you to be able to make that decision effectively. I don't know. I'm not really necessarily interested in that. But what I would say is that there is some sort of optimal efficiency for your body, right?
Yeah.
For your ability to perform the technique, right? So maybe just at a basic competency, that's like you have to have 70% of your weight on that foot without you overcommitting and throwing yourself into the action before you get the stimulus,
Right.
right? Maybe for other people, they can get to like 95% because they have mastered this skill and mastered their body such that they, even with 95% of their weight, their back foot almost completely light, right? They still haven't committed themselves to pushing off.
Yeah.
Right. Because often that's what we do, right? Like we say, okay, my decision making thing is like, do I step or don't I step? And so you
Right.
get into position and then you don't get to sit and you fall forward, right? You're like,
Yes.
and right. And why is that? Because you're trying to dial in what I love the term that you use, tension, right? You're trying to
Yeah.
dial in the tension.
Yeah.
So yeah. Sorry.
Well,
So keep
no.
talking about that.
No, and so no, just launching off like you said so many things that like inspired so much in my brain. Um and so like there are so many minute pieces for you as the student in this role, whether or not you're a student, right? But as the person making the decision, there are so many places for you to reflect on what's happening inside you because the decision is so simple. There's nothing hard about did my opponent step. There's nothing hard about observing that. So even though there's an external thing happening and you're watching that external thing and your thought is there, if you can get quiet enough, my experiences, this is not for everybody, probably. Right. Okay. So, but my experience doing it with tea, with small swords, not with long swords, but it doesn't matter, was that once I got myself quiet enough and got that tension where I needed it to be, then I could explore, how am I getting that tension where it needs to be? And then sometimes I would launch and I was like, I'm stepping offline. Why am I stepping offline? Oh, because as I'm creating that tension, I forgot that I had a core. And so I was having my ass stick out, and that's how I was stopping myself. And then when I went, my lunge was all fucked up. Okay, so I can come back and create the tension better. And like, and not once did T say anything to me other than good, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he didn't tell me how to fix my body. He just let me do 25 reps.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would bullshit about, what did you experience? And then I would do another 25 reps. And then we would bullshit about what I experienced, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a beauty in this, what some might call boring drill, is that it gives you as the student, as the practitioner, the opportunity to really get quiet, because that's the only way you're going to have that tension.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The moment I got keyed up and excited about hitting T, I could not stop.
Mm-hmm.
I could not be appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
So
And my partner today experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He was like, when you move, I want to chase you. And I'm like, what happens if you chase me? And he was like, you're going to hit my hands really hard. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to hit your hands really hard. Right?
So I think about an experience that I had with a student of mine who we were doing a similar drill, right? So it was probably a variation of a Shisen drill, right?
Sure.
So basically it was just sort of you step into critical distance, right, with a cut, right? So with a Shisen style cut, right? So with a point forward clearing action, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're waiting for you're waiting for some kind of hard or soft response, right? And
Right.
if the opponent strengthens, right, then the response of this drill would be to Zucken, right, or to basically to Zucken in this instance. And then if the opponent weakens, now they can weaken a variety of ways. We were working on this one particular aspect of weakening, which is to continue pushing laterally but with broken structure, so that your point ends up being pushed off to the side anyway, right? So even though you're directing your energy in the direction of the opponent's blade, because you're not structuring your point over it, their point is being trapped behind, right? And so in those cases we were training to continue to thrust through.
Sure.
Right. And so it's a really simple drill, and all we were focusing on was that decision point. So the skill that we were targeting was, can you observe the structure of the opponent's parry action, right? And can you respond correctly? Now, we began with a few reps just to make sure that the students understood the drill, and then we proceeded to increase intensity once it had been firmly established that the fencers knew what they were going for.
Right.
And one of my fencers, whom I love dearly, this is several years ago now, and actually he hasn't been my student for quite a while, but I love him dearly. He's a wonderful person and wonderful fencer. He could not get this to work, and the reason was because, half the time he got it to work, and half the time
Sure.
he did the correct technique with the force of 1,000 suns. You'd have to be whoever it is sitting at the top of HEMA rankings beta to be able to defeat the action, right? Half the time. Yeah, Andre the Giant. You'd have to be Andre the Giant to be able to defeat the action half the time. But the other half of the time, he would get stuffed, right?
Right.
And so, but the thing was, I asked him, what is it that's causing you to get stuck, right?
Yeah.
And why is it that you're getting this to work half the time? I want you now to slow this whole thing down to where you can get it to work 100% of the time. Because there is a speed,
Yeah.
right? There is a speed that you can get it to work 100% of the time.
Right.
Okay?
How slow did he have to go?
Well, so he had to go so slow that it would never work, right?
Right.
He had to go so slow that it would never work. And the reason that he avoided that uncomfortable space initially, or at least what we kind of shared and reflected on after, was that because he doesn't actually fence people.
Ah.
He doesn't fence
Oh.
people. He
Yeah.
guesses. He guesses and gambles with people, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
sometimes
And
he wins,
maybe
and yeah, you
maybe he
can
was
do well that
athletic
way,
enough. Yeah, he was athletic enough to have enough success with that
right?
technique
Right.
to, well, I shouldn't say technique, but with that tactic, yeah,
Sure.
to get there.
Yeah, and I would also quibble to say, like, I would call that a technique, right?
Okay, cool.
The question is, like, we can go down that rabbit hole another time. But the bottom line is, if you're in your drill, you're struggling to get something to work. That means you're anticipating. That means you're guessing, right? You're
Yes,
making your decision. You're making your decision about what technique you're supposed to do before the evidence has presented itself, right?
correct. Yeah,
and
yeah.
and that is not fencing,
No,
right? and
no.
and and well, and so I'm going to finish by saying that what he needed to do was slow down, because that's how fast he's able to fence,
Correct.
right? And that was kind of a huge eye opener, right? Like, oh wow, in order for me to be fencing, I have to go so unbelievably slow. And that's okay. As a coach, it's my responsibility to put him in that space as
Yeah,
much as I can, right? To put him in the space that he can comfortably do a thing, maybe be challenged a little bit, but find uh, moderate success doing the thing, but actually doing it rather than doing something different, which is what guessing, right? Anticipating
right.
and guessing is. So I'm sorry, the what you described, right, about your weight falling forward, right, is getting lost in your future story that you're telling, right?
Yeah,
Right, which is
right.
not feeling, because you're not actually present, you're not feeling the stimulus that and so
But this is okay. So you had sent me a quote, and I think we're
Hmm.
just going to put it in the description. I don't know if you want to read it, but you had sent me a quote from A- Alan
Alan
Watts,
Watts. Alan Watts, yep.
right? Whom y'all just go listen to 1,000,
Yeah.
like him
Hours. It's just
lecturing.
1,000 hours of, because there are 1,000
Yes.
hours of him lecturing, and you can listen to all of them and not have wasted your time.
No, just put it on and clean your house or whatever it is you do with your day. Yeah. So, and in that, of course, he is a big Buddhist and a big student of Eastern philosophy. And as a part of that, he was talking about the tendency to be stuck in thinking forward and backwards and never here. And that is absolutely 1,000% fencing. I talk all the time about Lishinara's Buddhism, right? I have to, like, for this drill to work, I have to 1,000 completely percent believe I'm going to step in, you're not going to move, I'm going to sheath in your face, and like teeth are going to go out the back of your mask, right? I have to believe that in my present. And I also have to believe you're going to step back and I am going to pause and be here.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to believe both of those at the same freaking time. And it's so hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the only way I can believe both of those is to be so still inside myself.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you continue talking about this as I pull up that Tom Durant's quote. Tom Dorrance? Dorrance or Durant's? Do we talk about that? Dorrance. Tom Dorrance. So it's like, it's for the audience, it's literally my favorite quote about fencing ever, right? And I'm just gonna pull it up here while you talk, and then maybe we'll share it with the audience, see if we can make that work.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. I think we ought to be able to figure out the tech for that, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so Lichtenauer's Buddhism is what I call it, right? That you have to believe it. And we talked about this last time, but I think this is encapsulated in the verse to proof to gefährt, right? And probably actually contained in the second piece of that couplet, which is no more than hard or soft, right? No more than hard or soft. That's it. And so that means I don't tell a story. I don't have this internal speaking dialogue occurring while I'm trying to fence. If I do, I will get hit. I promise you, because it's happened to me.
Yeah. Right.
Right? And
right.
every time I get hit with that, I know it's because I was too busy envisioning a specific future and having words about that future.
Yeah, I think getting it out into the very front of our conscience, right?
Yeah.
Conscious, where we can almost clearly articulate it. I mean, it is still happening split second, but right, when we're clearly articulating to ourselves, sort of we're losing so much time at that point that again we're just behind in the we're behind in the beat, right? We'll spend a lot of time talking about the beat, right, at some point.
Yeah.
But
not only are we losing time, but we're losing feeling.
Yeah. Right. So let's talk about, so we're going to put on Tom Dorrance, right, who is going to probably, yeah. So let's see how.
Told me about.
Can you hear him?
I sure can.
Those three real important things when you're working with a horse. Of those three things of feel, timing, and balance. And you were trying to explain to me about how you had a picture of it in your mind, and I wonder, could you tell me that again about? It was like you were describing holding the broom handle
on your thumb.
Yeah.
I have an idea. You've done that, haven't you, when you was a kid?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Balance it. Yeah.
Balance. The broom sticking up in the air, the handle here on your thumb, and you're trying to see how long you can keep it up.
Yeah.
Just getting it up to start with. Maybe quite a little project.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, you don't try to get it all one time.
Right.
But you practice a little, do something else, come back to it. But after a while, if it's working, you're getting it to work. You can set it up there and keep it there quite a little while. But it has to be alive.
Yeah.
Your thumb has to be alive, and if it gets dropped dead still, it isn't going to stay up.
Yeah.
Any little thing can tip it. But you're feeling this down in here. How to keep that broom part up. If it starts to tip this way, you come up.
Yeah.
You have to go maybe just a little farther than, in order to stop it, and then you have to move back
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit so you don't get behind too far. And if you get to doing this, you're liable to miss your timing and it'll fall down.
Yeah.
And that's like on these horses that I spoke about, and they were plumb green and get out and too cold.
Mm-hmm.
That was where this, you get in timing with the stride, the rhythm with that.
Yeah.
Right. So I saw you as excited as I was watching. And listening.
It's so good. It's so good. Y'all, that's what it sounds like to listen to a master talk. All right, continue on.
Yeah. Well, and so, the cat's out of the bag, right? Because it's horsemanship is what he's
Yeah.
describing.
Yeah.
Which is clear, at least by the end of the video. But like this idea of the broomstick analogy, right? And it's I would argue that it's fundamentally the same thing. So like feeling everything, including your opponent responding or not responding, right? Or
Yeah.
responding some way. Your opponent is the broomstick.
Yeah.
Your opponent is the broomstick, and you have to respond to the direction the broomstick goes. You also have to have some competency just with using your body so that you don't overcorrect, right?
Yeah.
So you don't overcommit to what you're trying. You're supposed to respond in kind, or respond with the most economical use of your energy, because if you go too far, or if you start swinging back and forth or whatever, right, you just have to go exactly how far you need to get your thumb back underneath the broom, the center of balance of the broom handle, and then you have to bring it back. And so again, it's being present, right? When you step in, you're watching what direction is this broomstick going, right?
Yeah.
And you're feeling it, right? But you don't say to yourself, "Oh no, it's going to the right." Right?
Yeah,
if
right.
you say to yourself, "Oh no, the broom is going to the right," you're never going to get there, right? Because there's no way that you can be tethering your experience to the movement of the broomstick when you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we could even back up earlier into how he even began that story, which he said, first you just have to get it up, which can be quite a little project.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Talk about this is I freaking love cowboys, right? That is the most delicate, gentle way to say, I'd like to watch you try this for the next 20 minutes. Right? Like you're not even going to get the broom up, right? But it can be quite a little project, right? And then he said, you're not going to try to get all this in one go.
Yeah.
Right? And then he described how you actually start to do the thing and included all of the points for failure in there, right? So there's so much, in there of him describing such a quote unquote simple action as keep the broom up in the air, right? And I think sometimes, especially as historical fencers, but I think maybe modern humanity, this is kind of the way we are taught that we should learn. We are taught that we should learn by sitting down and reading a whole book, and now I have an understanding of the whole subject. And that isn't how we learn, really, right?
Right. No, we especially mechanical arts, right? So things, the kind of things that we're concerned with here, right?
Yeah.
Like there is an intellectual, there is, what it means to learn in an intellectual tradition, or what it means to learn in an academic setting, right? And those things are, I would argue, or at least in my mind, I think of them a little differently, right? So like, is there ever a place where you just go and you read a bunch of books on a thing and right? But then it appears to me that the demonstration of competency or mastery within those skills are your ability to um, partake in that intellectual tradition, right? So your ability to write your own commentary or paper or whatever on the thing that you're learning about or thinking about.
Yeah, well, and I think, and so, yeah, I mean, I would take an issue that they're different. I would take issue with that idea because even in there, right? I think that oftentimes we think of learning as the passive reception of knowledge. And and learning, as you completed your sentence about it, you got to the using of the thing. Right? So even if it's intellectual, it's physical because our mind and our body are the same.
Right. And sort of it makes sense that, when you write a paper on a thing, you don't walk away with command or mastery over that thing necessarily. But if you write several papers over the course of a few years for different classes, but all focused around the same topic, then you definitely have developed your mental map of that topic, right? You understand the connections in a deep way, etc. So yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Because you had to play with the idea,
right? Yeah, yes, we have to put it back to play. Yeah. You had to play with the idea. You had to write a paper, and you had to have the professor say, this could be worked on a little bit. You need to bring this out a little bit more, right? Or
right?
I don't see the connection. I think you're kind of making stuff up,
Right.
or whatever, right?
Right. And then you get to start to play with, okay, hey, I created this idea, in the air, and I want to connect it to this other idea. I see it. And they're like, you need to be able to describe how you see it. And then, I mean, listen to my language. How do you see an idea? Right? It's inherently physical. So yeah, it's there, I think.
Sure. I'm happy.
But I'm derailing us.
It's okay. Well, so I think I had come in today really interested about hearing all about your experience over the last couple of weeks, and then and I did actually have a direction to go, and we've got time, but let's get back on
20
track.
minutes.
So
yeah.
So why don't you share some more with me about what you guys were up to?
Oh, okay. T and I? You mean? Yeah. So
that was what you shared your lesson today.
Yeah. And like that was derived out of working with T. And then let's see. Otherwise, so I would say that was what they presented to me, and what I presented to them was my winding interpretation, which was super, super, super fun. And they received it largely well, right? So this was really an exploration in what I would call HEMA peer review. Yeah. So T brought their new ideas that they wanted to play with, and I brought my new ideas that I wanted to play with, and we gave each other appropriate to our levels of fencing capability and fencing knowledge feedback and pushback, while also being open to learning the new thing, right? And so we very much were playing. It was super low key. We weren't testing each other to see like who could kick each other's ass, right? I don't even think we fenced. Because we were playing in these places of ideas, of presenting a thing which is still a work in progress, having the openness to present and receive that, to learn it and push back on it, which was my favorite. It was my favorite.
So, so one thing that I'm interested in exploring here, given what you just said, right? Particularly the idea that you had an openness. You both approached the exercise with an openness about sort of accepting that what the other person was sharing was some form of truth, right? And buying in fully, committing fully to the idea that you wanted to understand in a deep and profound way what the other person had developed, right? Their system or their framework or whatever it is, right? Their concepts, like to really explore them as though they were truth. And so I think that's super important. And I think I'm interested in talking about this from the perspective of the historical fencer.
There we are. Okay.
Cool.
Now we're actually back. Geez. Oh. Historical fencers are a thing.
Well, yeah, historical fences are a thing. That's actually probably the most concise way of kind of articulating the point that I was trying to make.
They exist.
So the audience is not going to hear all of the pontificating that I did when you went off the air. But I was like, I guess we're still alive, so I'm going to keep on talking. But we'll just cut all that out of it. Anyway, so the bottom line is like, okay, so what does it mean to be a historical fencer? What does it mean to be a historical fencer next to a modern fencer, or a martial artist, a historical martial artist next to a modern martial artist? And what are valid approaches to historical fencing? And the reason that I bring that up is because I think some of the baggage that we carry with us as being historical fencers is that we're hyper concerned about approach and validity of approach, and that gets in the way of us being open to hearing other people's ideas about fencing, right? Other people's ideas about what the sources say or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I was like, "Oh, James, valid. That's a problematic word choice." But now that you got to the end of your sentence, I understand. Yeah, we do concern ourselves with validity.
Right. I mean, so when, and we all have like things about what people do that we've consciously, I'll say that things about what people do that we've consciously decided that we're not going to do. Right. And
I do not enjoy the way they do X.
Yeah. And so how can you load a thing like that without sort of adopting some attitudes, some value-laden attitudes towards, whether or not what someone else is doing is correct, right? I mean, is it possible? And if it's not possible, then to what extent can it be mitigated, right? How can we keep ourselves in check so that when we see someone doing a thing, we're not immediately like, oh God, I think what they're doing is wrong. But then the other thing too, and so one last part of this question is there a way to do what we do well? Right. So now we're making claims about what it means to have competency and maybe even mastery over the exploration of historical martial arts. Is there a way to do it well? And should we be striving towards that? And if so, then is it our place to try and help guide other people who who want to put their best foot forward? So on the one hand, I'm saying like we have to be open, we have to be we have to consider that every approach is valid. But on the other hand, I'm saying there's a way that you can do this well And so if that's true, then that means there's also a way that you can do this poorly, right? And those seem
Yeah.
to exist in a sort of tension or conflict.
They do. They do. Okay. So, like, my initial thought to people having different approaches is I think about historical fencing a lot like I think about people's private bedroom activities. Like, I don't care really what you're doing unless I'm into it, and then I care a lot, right?
Right. And as long as you're not hurting anybody.
As long as you're not hurting anyone. Oh, actually, yeah. That's a fair point. Like, you can do bedroom activities wrong if they have no consent and people are getting injured. Yes. That is wrong. Otherwise, probably not wrong, right? Probably just either I'm into it or I'm not. So I know that's a ridiculous way to put it, but there you go.
Well, no, I think it's useful, right? Because so you can't have an openness to other people's ideas, right? You can't be willing you can't be willing to like really entertain the truth of what someone's saying, right? Unless you can kind of get over that. Right?
A friend of mine said you should try anything twice. Because the first time you're a little overwhelmed by the newness, and by the second time you can, have some discretion about whether you like it or not, right? Sure. And so, like, I think this applies to fencing. Yeah. Oftentimes, I will also say this. Okay, our pursuit of our martial art or fencing, because maybe they aren't the same, is hampered, I think, by the thing that allowed it to exist, i.e., that it happens mostly on the internet. So at least the exchange of ideas happens mostly on the internet, right? So that was a boon because it allowed it to flourish with enough people and to connect with enough people around the world so that we have a thing. But the nature of written word and video and photo not being fencing means that we are exchanging ideas in the realm where this thing doesn't exist.
Yeah. Now there'd be a distinct line of inquiry or as relates to the way that historical fencing exists in other contexts, namely the one context in particular that it exists mostly in the physical realm, right? Is like the competitive context, right? So the competitive tournament historical fencing context, right? Which is also a place where there are a ton of qualifications that you have to make about, or that we as a community have made about the type of fencing that that excels in such a context and how reflective it is of sort of quote unquote good historical fencing, right? And so that has, there's something to be said about that too.
Okay. How about, let me say this. Maybe we could define historical fencing by the test you create for your fencing.
That would be, so that's essentially what, there are different answers for that, but that's essentially what it is, right? So like, when someone says I'm an historical fencer, often they mean I'm a competitive longsword or it could also mean that it could also mean that I like dive headlong into texts. It could mean that I conceive of myself as being a part of this intellectual tradition of the texts, or it could mean that I'm see myself as a sort of cultural anthropologist. And so method and methodology have a strong role to play in what in what we're doing, and and also communicating that clearly, right? So like communicating
Yes.
to each other what my perspective is and what my methodology is, right? And what I'm attempting to achieve with this. So, you know, am I interested in getting into the mind of a historical people, or am I
Yeah.
interested in sort of recreating in a meaningful way, whatever that means? And then, or like, am I interested in taking this thing and using it to develop my own intellectual framework, right? In modern times.
Yeah.
You know, and so all of these, I would argue, are valid. I mean, as valid an approach as any other. Like, I don't, you know,
Well, you know how this is, I'm not going to be able to speak intelligently about this, but you know how like when they're looking for electrons, right? When we're trying to measure where an electron is,
mm,
it is everywhere until it's measured,
mhm,
right?
mm,
Like the act of measuring creates
mhm.
the
Yeah,
place,
yeah,
or maybe even creates the electron, right?
right, right.
That's distressing to think about, but you know,
Sure. No, I think that's really insightful.
but it's more or less true. And I think the same thing happens here, right? That there was not such a thing as a historical fencer focused on tournaments and succeeding in them until the tournament was created. So the
Mhm,
creation of the test is what backfilled the definition of the person or
mhm,
the definition of the pursuit.
mm.
It didn't happen the other way. We like to think it did because we experienced it in time that way, but it
Mm,
didn't really happen that way.
mhm. I think that's interesting that we experienced it in time one way, but that it really happens. Yeah, I think that's really good, useful.
Right?
Um, so so
So
yeah,
what does that
so
mean about what we're doing? Right? I
right.
think to like try to bring
Well,
my
right.
incoherent thoughts to
Hmm.
the meat of your question.
Well, so I guess one thing that I am interested in or concerned with about historical fencing is that we tend to load it up in a way that's kind of logically fallacious, right? Like it's logically unsound, right? Which
Yeah.
is that what we're doing is you are not doing HEMA unless you're looking in the text without any help from anybody else, right? To try and find something
That's
new and
already a
interesting,
lie. That's already
right?
bullshit. None of
Right.
us are
No,
looking
right.
at it without help. But anyways,
Right. But but in order, because you can't contribute unless you have something new and insightful to say about
okay.
what the texts. I mean, right? So
Yeah. No, I
and
mean
like,
this is
but
a thing that happens.
this is
Yeah.
why you have every 2 or 3 months you have someone who's been fencing for 3 months
Yeah.
posting videos of them fencing, right?
Yeah.
With their interpretation of the Zerkau, right? Or their interpretation of whatever, right? So like,
Right.
and so obviously they're starting from scratch because they've been doing this for 3 months, right? And if it was just going to be a carbon copy of something that was already out there, then what would be the point of share, right? In order to contribute, or in order to feel like one is contributing to the quote unquote HEMA community, you have to be doing research, you have to be doing interpretation, and probably interpretation is probably the biggest thing, right? But then on top of that, you have to fence well, right? Right.
Also be a physical fucking specimen.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I think most people know that that's a unrealistic goal, at the end of the day. But we certainly want you. You don't think so? Tell
I
me
think it
more.
gets a lot of truck.
Yeah. Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, definitely.
Listen, if who can I choose? If Danny DeVito
Hmm.
shows the best Zwerchau any of us have ever seen in the entire world,
Hmm.
most of us won't buy it. But if fucking Jason Momoa does it, we're gonna buy it.
Yeah. Sure.
right? And I only bring this up to point out, like, all of these things you lined out that we do as critics of others is already fucked. Like, we like to act like it's science. We like to act like we're making observations about their test and how real it is, and it's not. Anyways, continue.
Yeah.
We're social
I
creatures. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's no, you're. I think that's a point well taken. Right? And so, but also we're concerned with validation, right? So when a new fencer posts, talking about validity, when a new fencer posts, been fencing for 3 months, they're doing their Zwerkow interpretation, right? Why are they going on Facebook to do that? Right? Like, where's the value added, right? So obviously they're going because they want everyone to say, like, hey, great job, keep working at it. Rarely, but it does happen on occasion, right, where people say, hey, someone please correct me. But I think the reason that we don't get that as often is because that's not what people really feel like doing HEMA is, right? Doing HEMA is me with the texts, right? And like my contribution is when I read the texts, right, without any help from anyone else. And why? Because for a large swath, it exists in conflict with their methodology, right? If you're taking ideas from other people and you're not getting them from the text, right? Then are you doing HEMA, right? Or are you doing something that's modern, right? Something that and so does that make sense?
It does. And I think there's an interesting framing here. So when the term HEMA was created, before that, it didn't exist. Again, everything goes backwards. So before that, we were doing Western martial arts. And Western martial arts could have been anything from tomahawk to Bowie knife to competitive shooting to fencing. It was in effect because, did we talk about that? Oh no, I talked about this with T. Because the term martial arts was created whole cloth to sell karate to Americans, right? So like the term inherently implied Eastern, so we had to say Western because martial arts without an additive, already meant something else. Okay. So with all of that history to get us back, when HEMA as a phrase was created to push back against the idea of Western, then I was talking with my husband about it, and I don't know that I was arguing for it, but we were just discussing it as a phrase. And he was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, that is what we're doing. We're doing historical arts. And he was like, no, they are alive because you are making them now. It is a living tradition. It is not historical. That is a lie you're telling yourselves. And I got real hot about that. And we had a lot of very intense discussions about whether or not that was accurate. And it took some time, but I was like, yeah, actually, you're right. It is all alive. It is all created now. It is all present. And therefore, maybe that's how I came to my bedroom activities analogy, but like that. So therefore, it is what you make it.
Yeah. Right. So I think there's something worth saying is that that's true for you, right?
Yes.
But it's not true for everybody. And just because you say it, right? Just because you feel like you've come to like a real truth about the world and about what we do, which is that what we're doing is fundamentally, modern, present, whatever, right? or at least it is what you make of it, right? I don't want to put
Yeah.
words on your mouth. That's what you said, right?
No, that's it. That's it.
But it's not true for other people, right? For other
You're
people,
right.
no. What I'm doing is I'm historical, right?
Sure.
And I'm trying to recreate, and so that's the way they frame it. And the other parts of the discussion, as nuanced and rich and developed as they are, they don't enter into the conversation for those people. And so it's not, it doesn't mean, like, that doesn't mean, well, your insights are so profound that they are now truth. They're the objective truth for everybody else, right? And I know that, I know you're not saying that, but I think it's worth like saying, like,
no, people
part of-
completely fucking disagree. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
No.
well, and part of it is what you make of it, is that for some people it is that it's it's what kind of you thought it was before you got into your intense discussions with your husband, right?
Well, and okay, so why then is it important to define it? What is the purpose of the definition?
Sure. And so that actually gets me to what was already on the tip of my tongue, which is, can you do this thing well? Right? And so that the implications of your framing are very deep within, right? This notion of being able to do it well, being able to approach it with a degree of competency and or mastery, right? With art. Can you do HEMA with art? Right. Yeah. So we've been talking about fencing with art, and we've been talking about teaching with art, and developing a system, a pedagogical system with art. And now we have to ask the question: what does it mean to do HEMA with art?
Yeah.
And so that's, I think you're going to get the most variance in answer to that question. And I'd be curious for you, right? Because it is pretty heavily dependent on your own mindset. Like your motivations are framing your truth, right?
Sure.
But that being said, I'd love to hear what doing HEMA with art, the application of mastery, right, looks like to you.
Yeah. To me, for me, and no one else has to.
Right.
I walk in this space and try to walk out better. That's that. So I'm using the physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, for me, pursuit of this thing, right? The pursuit. Well, I am using the physical pursuit of this thing to get at the emotional, mental, spiritual work I'm trying to do as a human outside this space.
Yeah. So it could be anything. It could be historical fencing, or it could be knitting, right? Or
for me, yes.
Yeah.
Right? So I could go to a yoga practice and do exactly what I'm doing here. Because that's the way I pursue, because this is life. Because I'm alive here. This is my present moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to do the things I do thoughtfully. I try to do them skillfully, i.e., with competence. And I try to do them artfully in that they have a breadth of application to all of the rest of me. So when I'm sewing a doublet of 10,000 holes, each of my holes is getting better as I do it because I'm getting that practice. And
It's not 10,000, is it?
No, it literally is.
Oh my
I did the
God.
math. I did the math. Yeah.
Holy
no.
moly.
Okay. So, and each one's about a minute. So, but as I'm doing that, each one is individually getting better, and my sewing skill is getting better, and it's getting more efficient, and my physical movement is getting better. And I am practicing showing up every fucking day and doing some because I suck at that.
Mm-hmm.
I am so bad at committing to something long term where I have to touch it every single day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Fencing's the only thing that's been easy for me.
Sure.
I can fence every day, right? But if you were like, just remember to take your medicine in the morning every day. I'm like, oh, that's a struggle, right? Get up every morning at the same time. I could do it for a week, but then what do you want me to do? Yeah. So what am I doing with the double of 10,000 holes? I am starting a project. I am working on it every day, and I am finishing it. And that's what I'm actually doing. So you said, Jess, do you have 3 things you're working on? Yeah, I do. Here's an example of where I'm taking a physical pursuit to work on a human failing I think I need work on.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
that is not anyone else's answer to what they're
for
doing
sure.
in HEMA.
Well,
right?
I don't know. I don't know if it is, right? So I
Well.
was just going to say, Dustin Reagan had shared a meme with me like a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember, but I forwarded it on to you, which is that, like there was a guy, there's like these are all stick figures or whatever sitting. There's one guy sitting on the couch playing the flute, and the guy goes next to him and he's like, "What are you doing?" And the guy playing the flute is like, "Oh no," or no, he's like, "I'm playing the flute." And the guy next to him is like, "Why?" And the flute player goes, "Oh no, you don't know what it means to just do whatever the fuck you want."
Right.
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 Like, that's so for some people, right, certainly, or probably Dustin in that moment, or certainly I know I feel that way often, is that for me it's less about contextualizing what we're doing in the sort of broader, like what it means for my ultimate self at some point, right? Which we've spent a lot of time talking about, right?
Sorry.
This sort of idea. No, so, but the ultimate self, right? Like, so what, I want to be a warrior. And so I'm going to have competency and skills and mastery of shooting and archery and fencing and boxing and grappling and, all of these things. But again, I love that you brought up the fact that martial art as a concept is relatively modern, right?
Yeah.
And so, but like, versus I just picked some things that I have a moderate interest in because I need something.
Right.
And I don't really have this sort of vision for myself. I don't have a sort of vision for myself that once I have mastery over, fencing and shooting and wrestling, that I'm going to be like a warrior, right? That I'm going to finally have achieved my, level 99, with max stats or whatever, right?
Right.
So is it? I like you say, I want to wake up. I want to go to bed a better version of me than I woke up, and that could be in fighting, which I've chosen, right? But as to why, I'm really over like the question of whether what it means for me in the ultimate end. But then also, like, with regards to historical fencing, right? So the next question I would ask is, you have made choices vis-a-vis historical fencing, and what it
Yeah.
means to do historical fencing well. So keeping in mind that you're just using historical fencing or anything as a vehicle to experience the world
Yep.
and develop and grow within the world, right? Keeping that in mind, what guides your choices as to what it means to use historical fencing to make yourself better, or what it means to make the decisions about how you approach historical fencing to make it its optimal sort of put it in its optimal state.
For me, because fencing cannot be done in a vacuum and it cannot be done solo, my choices are driven by my relationships with my fellow fencers that come out
Mhm.
and work with me.
Mm,
That decides how I do it and what I'm
mm.
doing. Yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
that's amazing. I think that's really deep and profound.
it is the most vulnerable, challenging, difficult, thought provoking, and wonderful thing I could do. Because there are people that walk in that I don't know how I'm going to help them swing a sword. Right?
Hmm.
Like because for me, like people come to me thinking I know something, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I like to think I know a few things that I could share with somebody. But I have to throw myself against the wall of my ignorance in this space. And that's what I'm doing. That's the way I approach it. And good is I did it the properly challenging amount for both of us,
Cool.
for me.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. I don't know. I think it's probably going to be lost on some just how vulnerable you are in that moment, and especially like to say that your approach is essentially guided by your relationships and your experience with other people in the community,
Yeah.
right? That's a pretty that's not a thing that we like to say, right? That we're, we because we want to be right, we want to be objectively right, we want to be and so our approach has to be governed by science or whatever, right? Like by the and I so some an insight that I had a few days ago, I think I shared with you, which is this idea that because I've been concerned with this question for a little while, right? What is it? Not only was it, what is it about new historical fencers who feel like they are going to get validation from posting videos of them at the very very beginning stages of their journey, um, with the expectation that people who have been doing this for a really long time and have come to pretty coherent ideas about what the things in the text should look like or whatever, like what is the validation that they're getting from that, what is compelling them to share,
Yeah.
but then also what is the turnoff, right, for seasoned veterans in the community? Why is it like, okay, here we go again, right?
Right.
And part of it I think is just the paradox of what it is that we're doing, right, which is the sort of like what it means to do HEMA is to have your own insights about what these texts say, and also be great fencers, right? But then also I think part of it is that when we see people share ideas about historical fencing that don't relate to anything in the ether, right?
Mm.
That people are approaching this. They're not approaching it like by connecting their ideas to the ideas that other people have already established, or things that kind of people agree on or disagree on, or it's like for me, I think when I'm most interested in hearing someone's insights is when they've demonstrated that they have command over what lots of people are saying, like genuinely understand the approaches, the fencing systems, the pithy little truths of the world, right? Like when they can say all of them, right? And then we can say, these are my ideas. This is how it connects to your idea,
Mhm.
right? When you
Mhm.
demonstrate to me that you understand my perspective. And that's not just true in fencing, right? That's true in, like, whenever I see anyone say anything.
Mhm.
Mostly, I'm not compelled to engage with people with regards to politics or with
Mhm.
regards to whatever, right? Mostly,
Mhm.
I'm not compelled to engage with them because they're sort of very upfront about the fact that they don't share my views. And not just that they don't share my views, but they don't even care enough to think about them,
Mhm.
right? That these are, they have their views, and this is how they got here. And so listen up, everybody, because I've got it figured out. And I don't know. I don't know if there's something about being in a community that has more to do with engaging with what's out there than it does with coming up with something new and interesting. And I think the people that we elevate the highest, as a community, tend to be the people that have demonstrated that they can engage with the most people.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I think so. And if I can try to have a moment just to reflect and maybe put what you said in my words, and then we
Mhm.
could, maybe I'm there, maybe I'm not. But it seems to me that what you are addressing here of a person who is an outsider is walking in the room and asking for acceptance. And those in the room said, you need to be here a minute. You need to listen to the conversation here first.
Mhm.
Then we'll decide if we accept you.
Mhm.
And so ultimately, though you began this line of questioning with the idea of validity of approach, what we're really talking about is group relationship dynamics and how that plays out amongst humans. So there seems to me then to be a disconnect between what we present to be as a community,
Mhm.
the terms for acceptance, and what our actual terms are.
Yeah. I think that was really well done. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for unfucking that for everybody listening. Yeah, I think so. I think you've very, very nicely and concisely addressed the main issue of my mind, and kind of the day, right? Which is like,
Yeah.
because I do think that I think we present that what we're doing is like, success in tournaments and interpretations that everybody loves. Right? Like
Yes.
that's the only way that you can, like, rise to the top of
Right.
the dominance hierarchy.
Right. But the reality is everyone in the room, from the person who's been in that room for 25 years to the person that walked in 5 minutes ago just wants everyone else in the room to say, we want you here.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
We should end on that.
We should. And on that note, everybody, we'll see you next week. Hopefully on time.
Maybe.
But also maybe, right? Maybe
Yeah,
not.
don't count on that. Did I mention what I'm working on here? Come on.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.